For those who believe in the paranormal, the most compelling evidence comes not from darkened laboratories or carefully controlled experiments, but from ordinary homes where something extraordinary refuses to stay hidden. For over a century, investigators have documented cases where unexplained phenomena intrude on everyday life. Objects moving without cause, voices emerging from empty rooms, physical laws seemingly suspended. These accounts raise an unsettling question about the events that unfolded in a modest London suburb between 1977 and 1979. Just what haunted the house at 284 Green Street? The phenomenon of poltergeist activity appears across cultures and throughout recorded history. The term itself comes from German, meaning noisy ghost, and describes disturbances that differ markedly from traditional hauntings, where ghost sightings typically involve apparitions of deceased individuals in specific locations. Poltergeist cases center on kinetic energy, objects thrown, furniture displaced, inexplicable sounds that suggest intelligence and intention. The annals of paranormal research contain hundreds of documented poltergeist cases. In 1967, the Rosenheim poltergeist in Bavaria caught the attention of physicists when electrical disturbances at a law office defied conventional explanation. Lights swung wildly, telephone systems malfunctioned, and developing fluid in a photocopier leaked without any mechanical cause. German physicist Dr. Friedbert Karger investigated extensively and concluded that known physical processes could not account for the phenomena. Earlier still, the Borley Rectory case in Essex, England, earned the distinction of being called the most haunted house in England, after decades of reported activity between the 1860s and 1939. Reports included phantom footsteps, ringing bells, and objects hurled across rooms. Multiple witnesses, including clergy and paranormal investigators, documented experiences that resisted rational explanation. What makes these cases particularly intriguing is their tendency to center around specific individuals, often adolescents. Researchers have noted patterns suggesting that poltergeist activity correlates with emotional distress, family disruption, or significant life transitions. Whether this indicates a psychological component, a paranormal sensitivity heightened by stress, or mere coincidence remains hotly debated. By the summer of 1977, the quiet streets of Enfield in North London represented working-class stability. Row houses lined Green Street, each identical to the next, council-owned properties providing affordable housing to families navigating economic uncertainty. Number 284 stood indistinguishable from its neighbors, a three-bedroom semi-detached structure built in the 1920s, weathered but functional. The Hodgson family had occupied the house since the early 1970s. Peggy Hodgson, 47 years old, raised her 4 children alone following her divorce. The household consisted of 13-year-old Margaret, 11-year-old Janet, 10-year-old Johnny, and 7-year-old Billy. It was an ordinary family managing ordinary challenges, financial constraints, the complications of single parenthood, the normal friction of children sharing small spaces. On the evening of August 30, 1977, that ordinariness shattered. Peggy heard shuffling sounds from upstairs, followed by 4 loud knocks. When she investigated, her daughters told her their beds had been shaking. Peggy dismissed it as nighttime restlessness, instructing them to settle down. But then she witnessed something that defied her understanding of physical reality. A heavy chest of drawers began sliding across the floor, moving toward the bedroom door. Peggy pushed it back. The chest slid forward again. She pushed harder, applying her full weight. The furniture resisted, as if something were pushing from the opposite side. Frightened, Peggy gathered her children and fled next door to the Nottingham family residence. Vic Nottingham, a builder, and his adult son Gary agreed to investigate. Inside 284 Green Street, they heard knocking sounds emanating from multiple locations: walls, ceilings, floors. The sounds moved through the house with apparent intelligence, responding when addressed, intensifying when challenged. The Nottinghams had no explanation. Whatever was occurring exceeded their frame of reference. Peggy contacted the police. Woman Police Constable Carolyn Heaps responded to the call on September 1, 1977. She entered the house expecting to find a domestic disturbance, perhaps teenagers playing pranks, maybe a heating system creating odd sounds. What she witnessed instead would appear in her official police report and remain a matter of public record. WPC Heaps watched a chair move. Not vibrate, not wobble slightly. The chair, a heavy wooden piece, shifted approximately 4 feet across the floor while no one touched it. The movement was deliberate, smooth, and impossible according to any natural law Heaps understood. She documented the incident but acknowledged that police lacked jurisdiction over furniture that moved autonomously. Without evidence of a crime, law enforcement could offer no assistance. Desperate for help, Peggy contacted the Daily Mirror newspaper. Reporter George Fallows arrived expecting a minor human interest story. Instead, he found himself documenting phenomena that would thrust him and the Hodgson family into an 18-month ordeal of international scrutiny. Fallows contacted the Society for Psychical Research, Britain's oldest organization dedicated to investigating paranormal claims. Founded in 1882, the SBR had built a reputation for rigorous, skeptical investigation. The Society's archives contained the most comprehensive collection of paranormal research in the world, meticulously documented by scientists, physicians, and scholars who approached extraordinary claims with extraordinary scrutiny. The call reached Morris Gross on September 5, 1977. Gross was 78 years old, a successful inventor who held patents on numerous mechanical devices, including the rotating advertising billboard visible at bus stops across Britain. He had served in the Royal Artillery during World War II, survived the evacuation of Dunkirk, and spent decades building a lucrative engineering consultancy. His interest in paranormal research was recent, born from personal tragedy. In August 1976, Gross's youngest daughter Janet had been killed in a motorcycle accident. In the devastating weeks that followed, Gross experienced a series of meaningful coincidences that suggested his daughter's consciousness might have survived death. A photograph fell from its frame at the moment he was thinking of her. Her favorite music played on the radio when he switched it on. Small events, easily dismissed individually, that accumulated into something that felt like communication. Grief-stricken but intellectually curious, Gross joined the Society for Psychical Research, hoping to find evidence that consciousness persisted beyond physical death. When the Enfield case arose, he volunteered immediately. Gross arrived at 284 Green Street with an inventor's mindset: observe, document, test hypotheses, eliminate variables. He met Peggy Hodgson, exhausted and frightened, struggling to understand what was happening in her home. He interviewed the children, spoke with neighbors, examined the house for structural issues that might cause sounds or movements. On September 8, Gross witnessed his first undeniable phenomenon. A loud crash erupted from upstairs while he stood in the kitchen with Peggy and 3 Daily Mirror reporters. They rushed to investigate and found objects scattered across the floor, items that had been secured on shelves, now lying in positions they could not have reached through natural falling. Convinced something genuine was occurring, Gross committed to a comprehensive investigation. He contacted Guy Lyon Playfair, an experienced paranormal researcher who had spent years investigating cases in Brazil. Playfair joined the investigation on September 12, 1977, bringing expertise in poltergeist phenomena and a healthy skepticism about witness reliability. Together, Gross and Playfair would conduct over 180 visits to the Hodgson home over the next 2 years. They installed recording equipment, set up cameras, documented incidents as they occurred. Gross often slept on the living room floor, maintaining vigil through the night. His dedication was absolute, driven by his desire to understand whether consciousness could manifest independently of physical bodies. The phenomena escalated rapidly. Furniture overturned without contact. Objects flew across rooms, Legos, toys, books, often narrowly missing people. Knocking sounds occurred on demand, responding to requests with specific numbers of taps. The activity seemed focused primarily on the children, particularly Janet, though it manifested throughout the house. By late September 1977, something new emerged that would define the Enfield case and generate controversy for decades. A voice began speaking through Janet. It was not a child's voice. It was harsh, guttural, unmistakably masculine, the voice of an elderly man. The voice identified itself as Bill Wilkins. It claimed to have lived in the house and to have died there. When questioned by Morris Gross's son Richard, a solicitor who participated in the investigation, the voice provided specific details. "I went blind and I had a hemorrhage, and I fell asleep and I died on a chair in the corner downstairs." The investigators had no immediate way to verify these claims, but the voice itself defied simple explanation. Recordings captured its distinctly male timbre, its gruff quality, its tendency to swear and make crude jokes. Witnesses described Janet's face contorting during the episodes, her body posture changing, her mannerisms transforming into those of an old man. To eliminate the possibility of conscious fakery, Gross conducted tests. He taped Janet's mouth shut. The voice continued, though muffled. He filled her mouth with water. The voice still emerged, its quality unchanged. Medical professionals who examined Janet found no physical abnormality that would explain her ability to produce such sounds. Critics immediately suggested ventriloquism, but ventriloquism relies on techniques that leave the vocal cords essentially uninvolved for certain sounds, substituting lip movements and breath control. Janet's voice during these episodes engaged her false vocal cords, structures normally unused in speech, producing a harsh, unnatural quality. Even trained stage ventriloquists acknowledge that sustaining such a voice for extended periods would be extraordinarily difficult, particularly for a child. The Bill Wilkins voice became the most controversial element of the Enfield case. Skeptics pointed to it as obvious fraud. Believers considered it compelling evidence of genuine possession or supernatural communication. Gross himself remained uncertain, but documented everything meticulously. In January 1978, Guy Lyon Playfair discovered that a previous occupant of 284 Green Street had indeed been named Wilkins. Further investigation revealed that William Charles Wilkins had lived in the house and died there on June 20, 1963, from a brain hemorrhage. He had gone blind before his death. The details matched what the voice had described. Years later, when recordings of the Bill Wilkins voice were played on LBC radio, a man named Terry Wilkins contacted the station. He identified the voice as remarkably similar to his father's, William Charles Wilkins, the former occupant of 284 Green Street who had died under the exact circumstances described. This confirmation added an eerie dimension to the case. Either Janet had somehow researched the previous occupant's death, a challenging feat for a child in 1977 without internet access, or something genuinely anomalous was occurring. The investigation attracted significant attention from other researchers. In December 1977, Anita Gregory and John Beloff, both members of the Society for Psychical Research, visited the house. They came away deeply skeptical. Gregory observed what she considered suspicious behavior from the children, catching them in acts that suggested deliberate trickery. She witnessed Janet bending spoons when she thought no one was watching. Video footage captured Janet using a broom handle to create knocking sounds. These discoveries created divisions within the SPR itself. Gregory argued the entire case was an elaborate hoax perpetrated by children seeking attention. Gross and Playfair acknowledged that some incidents were clearly faked, but maintained that a core of genuine phenomena remained unexplained. The controversy intensified when Janet and Margaret admitted to faking some of the activity. Under pressure from skeptics, they confessed they had occasionally created false phenomena. However, Gross and Playfair convinced them to retract these confessions, arguing the admissions had been coerced and didn't reflect the full truth of their experiences. This pattern, genuine phenomena mixed with deliberate fakery, is common in poltergeist cases and makes investigation extraordinarily challenging. Researchers must distinguish between authentic anomalies and understandable efforts by stressed individuals to reproduce or amplify phenomena they've genuinely experienced. Morris Gross spent months testing and documenting. He recorded hundreds of hours of audio. He cataloged over 2,000 incidents. He interviewed dozens of witnesses. His conclusion: approximately 80% of the Enfield phenomena could not be explained by fraud, misperception, or natural causes. Among the most compelling incidents was the movement of heavy furniture when all occupants were visible and accounted for. Witnesses described a solid oak sideboard rotating 90 degrees while everyone stood several feet away. They saw beds lift and tilt with occupants still on them. These events occurred in the presence of multiple observers, including journalists, neighbors, and investigators who had no apparent motivation to lie. The knockings demonstrated apparent intelligence. Gross would request specific numbers of knocks, "Give me 7 knocks," and receive exactly 7 in response. He conducted experiments where the knocks seemed to originate from inside solid walls, with no possible human source. Audio analysis revealed sounds that suggested impacts from within structural elements rather than external striking. Perhaps most disturbing were the incidents involving physical interaction with the children. Multiple witnesses described seeing Janet and Margaret lifted and thrown. These were not gentle levitations. The children crashed into walls, landed hard on furniture, sustained bruises and minor injuries. The force involved exceeded what the children could have generated themselves through jumping or deliberate falling. One particularly well-documented incident occurred when photographer Graham Morris captured a sequence of images showing Janet apparently suspended midair in an unnatural horizontal position. Critics argued the photos showed nothing more than an energetic child jumping. But Morris, a professional photographer experienced in capturing motion, maintained the positioning and trajectory were wrong for a normal jump. The angle, the height, the body positioning suggested external force rather than self-propelled movement. By spring 1978, the phenomena had become so frequent and intense that the family struggled to maintain any semblance of normal life. Sleep deprivation affected everyone. The constant scrutiny from investigators, journalists, and curiosity seekers added additional stress. Television crews camped outside. Neighbors tired of the disruption. The children missed school. Peggy Hodgson found herself defending her family against accusations of fraud while simultaneously trying to cope with phenomena she couldn't understand or control. The case also took a toll on Morris Gross. He invested enormous time and energy, neglecting his business and personal life. His obsession with the case reflected his deeper need to find evidence of survival after death, to believe his daughter Janet still existed somewhere beyond physical reality. Critics suggested this emotional investment compromised his objectivity. In May 1978, the Society for Psychical Research established a committee to review the investigation. The committee examined witness testimony, reviewed recordings and photographs, and interviewed key participants. Their report, while cautious, acknowledged that credible witnesses had reported phenomena they could not explain through conventional means. The committee was particularly impressed by testimony from the Nottingham neighbors, who had no obvious motivation to fabricate stories, and who described specific incidents with detail and consistency. The committee expressed reservations about the Bill Wilkins voice, noting the possibility of ventriloquism or vocal manipulation. They also flagged concerns about incidents that lacked independent verification. But they concluded that sufficient evidence existed to warrant serious consideration of paranormal explanations for at least some of the Enfield phenomena. Those seeking rational explanations for the Enfield case have numerous compelling arguments. The most obvious is that children, particularly pre-adolescent girls, are at the center of the majority of documented poltergeist cases. This pattern suggests psychological rather than supernatural causes. Parapsychologist William Roll studied American poltergeist cases extensively and developed the theory of recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, or RSPK. Roll proposed that individuals under severe emotional stress might unconsciously manifest kinetic phenomena as a release for repressed feelings. The Hodgson household fit this profile perfectly. A recently divorced family struggling financially, children dealing with their father's abandonment, living in cramped quarters with minimal privacy. Janet in particular exhibited signs of distress. She displayed aggressive behavior, sudden mood swings, and what appeared to be dissociative episodes. A physician prescribed Valium to manage her agitation. These symptoms align with various psychological conditions that might explain at least some of her experiences through neurological or psychiatric frameworks rather than paranormal ones. The fakery that was documented undermines the entire case in many skeptics' eyes. If Janet and Margaret were willing to create false phenomena, how can any of the reported incidents be trusted? The presence of motivated investigators like Gross, desperate to find evidence of survival after death, created an environment where ambiguous events could be interpreted as paranormal when more prosaic explanations existed. Stage magicians who examined the case identified multiple techniques the children could have used to create seemingly impossible effects. Milbourne Christopher, a professional illusionist and paranormal skeptic, concluded after his investigation that the phenomena resulted from the antics of clever children, combined with credulous investigators who wanted to believe. The Bill Wilkins voice, despite its eerie accuracy regarding the previous occupant's death, could have mundane origins. Children in the neighborhood might have known about the old man who died in the house. Local gossip could have provided details that Janet unconsciously incorporated. Her ability to produce the harsh voice could represent an unusual talent rather than supernatural possession.
We are deep in the case now. Don't let YouTube bury this file. To keep watching videos like this, you need to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Please leave a comment telling me where you're watching this video from. Now, back to the shadows.
The photographs showing levitation can be explained as perfectly timed shots of normal jumping. Any active child bouncing on a bed could be caught mid-leap in a position that appears supernatural when frozen in a single image. The fact that such photos are rare despite extensive photographic documentation suggests they captured ordinary moments misinterpreted as extraordinary. Skeptics also note the remarkable timing of phenomena. Incidents seem to occur most frequently when investigators were present but not actively observing, when cameras had just been moved, when attention had shifted elsewhere. This pattern suggests conscious or unconscious performance rather than spontaneous supernatural events. The electrical and mechanical failures reported during the investigation, tape recorders malfunctioning, cameras failing, equipment behaving erratically, could result from a house with aging wiring and the strain of running multiple devices simultaneously. Confirmation bias might lead investigators to attribute normal technical problems to paranormal interference. Finally, the gradual cessation of phenomena in late 1978 and early 1979 fits a psychological rather than supernatural explanation. As the children matured, as family circumstances stabilized, as the novelty wore off and attention diminished, the phenomena faded. If genuine supernatural forces were at work, why would they respect developmental timelines and lose interest when media coverage decreased? Yet the questions that resist these explanations deserve serious consideration. The sheer number of witnesses, over 30 people including police, neighbors, journalists, and investigators, reported experiencing phenomena they found inexplicable. Were all of them mistaken? Were they all victims of elaborate trickery by two children? WPC Carolyn Heaps had no connection to the family, no belief in the paranormal, and no motivation to fabricate her official police report. She documented witnessing a chair move without physical contact. Her testimony represents institutional acknowledgement of something extraordinary. The Nottingham neighbors initially tried to help the family through what they assumed was a prank or mechanical problem. They had no interest in paranormal claims and stood to gain nothing from supporting the Hodgson story. Yet Vic and Gary Nottingham both testified to experiencing knocking sounds they could not explain or locate. The consistency of the phenomena is also remarkable. Over 18 months across hundreds of incidents, the poltergeist displayed characteristic behaviors: the knocking in response to questions, the focus on specific individuals, the physical interactions, the voice phenomena. If this was hoax, it represented an extraordinarily sustained and sophisticated performance by children who had everything to lose. their privacy, their normalcy, their reputation, and little to gain beyond fleeting attention that quickly became burden rather than reward. The Bill Wilkins identification remains deeply unsettling. Even if Janet somehow knew that a man named Wilkins had died in the house, how would she have known the specific details of his death? The blindness, the hemorrhage, the chair in the corner. These were not public record. The confirmation by Terry Wilkins decades later suggests either remarkable research by a child or something genuinely anomalous. Morris Gross offered £1,000, a substantial sum, to anyone who could duplicate the Bill Wilkins voice through ventriloquism or any other technique. No one successfully claimed the reward. Professional voice analysts who studied the recordings noted the unusual engagement of false vocal cords, a technique difficult even for trained performers to sustain. The photographs, while controversial, include images captured by professional photographer Graham Morris under conditions he controlled. Morris had extensive experience photographing motion and action. His insistence that the Janet levitation images showed something beyond normal jumping deserves weight, given his expertise and lack of obvious motivation to lie. Perhaps most compelling are Janet's own accounts decades later. Now Janet Winter, she has maintained consistently that while she did fake some phenomena, approximately 2%, by her estimation, the overwhelming majority of experiences were real and beyond her control. She describes the voice as something that would overtake her, that she couldn't stop or control, that left her feeling violated and exhausted. Why would she maintain this position decades after the media attention faded? She gains nothing from continuing to insist on the paranormal nature of the events. She has acknowledged the fakery, removing the incentive to defend a complete fabrication. Her consistent testimony suggests genuine belief in her experiences, even while admitting to occasional deception. The Enfield case may ultimately represent something more complex than a simple choice between real and fake. Human psychology, family dynamics, genuine anomalous phenomena, and deliberate trickery might all coexist in ways that resist clean categorization. Poltergeist cases frequently involve adolescents experiencing stress. Whether this stress manifests paranormal phenomena through some mechanism we don't understand, or whether stress creates psychological conditions that make individuals more susceptible to misperception and fantasy, or whether stress simply provides motivation for attention-seeking behavior, these remain open questions. The Enfield Poltergeist eventually stopped, as most poltergeist cases do. By late 1979, the phenomena had largely ceased. The family remained in the house. Peggy Hodgson lived there until her death in 2003. Subsequent residents reported no unusual activity, suggesting whatever occurred was specifically connected to the Hodgson family during that particular period. Morris Gross maintained his belief in the authenticity of the Enfield case until his death in 2006. He continued investigating paranormal claims, always hoping to find definitive proof of survival after death. Guy Lyon Playfair remained convinced that genuine phenomena occurred at Enfield, though he acknowledged the complications introduced by the children's occasional fakery. Janet and Margaret have appeared in numerous documentaries over the years, always maintaining their core story while acknowledging they occasionally deceived investigators. Their willingness to admit partial fraud while insisting on the reality of most experiences adds a layer of credibility skeptics find inconvenient. What we're left with is one of the most extensively documented cases in paranormal research history. Hundreds of hours of recordings, thousands of photographs, testimony from dozens of witnesses, and years of intensive investigation by both believers and skeptics. Yet definitive answers remain elusive. Those who believe the Enfield case was genuine point to the quantity and quality of evidence, the credibility of many witnesses, and the specific details that resist simple debunking. They argue that dismissing the entire case requires either believing in a massive conspiracy or assuming extraordinary incompetence by everyone involved. Skeptics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that natural human tendencies toward misperception, combined with the desire for attention and the influence of suggestion, adequately explain the events. They note that in centuries of paranormal investigation, no case has ever provided definitive, replicable proof of supernatural phenomena. Perhaps the most honest conclusion is that we simply don't know. The Enfield Poltergeist remains what it has always been, a collection of testimonies, recordings, photographs, and experiences that different people interpret through different frameworks. Whether those frameworks prioritize belief in the supernatural or commitment to materialist explanations often reveals more about the interpreter than the interpreted. The house at 284 Green Street still stands. It looks unremarkable, indistinguishable from its neighbors. Current residents report no unusual activity. The children who experienced the phenomena are now adults with families of their own. Morris Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair have passed away, their investigations complete. But the questions remain. In the quiet suburban streets of Enfield, something happened between 1977 and 1979 that 30 witnesses found impossible to explain. Whether it marked a genuine intrusion of the paranormal into everyday life or a complex psychological and sociological phenomenon, the silence of certainty eludes us still. What haunted the Hodgson family may matter less than why we remain so desperately curious about the answer, and why, decades later, the case continues to fascinate those who wonder what boundaries exist between the possible and the impossible.
We made it out of this one, but the darkness runs deep. If you think you can handle it, check out the other cases on the channel. Don't risk losing the signal. Like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. The next investigation is starting now.